We are live.
Yay! It is Monday. That means you made it through the weekend. I am Old New Dude. He is.
Richard York, Asher's trueborn son.
And this is a Storm of Swords, John 1. Greetings to everyone. Thank you for joining us. And without further this weekend, I was telling Richard, apparently I tried to break my big toe. And I guess it hit that one because it's the biggest toe and it was the easiest target, but the metal lid for a Instapot Food Ninja thingy. Um, there's the counter, a microwave, and then a George Foreman grill, and then I had that lid sitting on top of it. And I go to open the door to make myself a bowl of cereal, and it slides off and angles perfectly to hit the toenail on the big toe, and that bad boy is still hurting. It's been over 2 days. So my wife's like, we can go to urgent care. I'm like, oh no, we can't. I can hobble. I'm good. So that was the weekend. But uh, before I go down and rabbit hole on my toe, we'll start with the brains of the operation, which is Richard. He will say what he saw in the chapter, and then I'll jump in with my stupid stuff. So take it away, Richard.
Thank you, sir. Storm 7, John 1. The first time John misidentifies Mansell, he sings about a Dornishman, a wife, and a sword. And we can talk more about this at the end of the chapter, but it's interesting what the chapter that immediately follows it too.
Okay.
The world was gray darkness, smelling of pine and moss and cold. Pale mists rose from the black earth as the riders threaded their way through the scatter of stones and scraggly trees, down toward the welcoming fires strewn like jewels across the floor of the river valley below.
Hey, stop right there.
Yeah.
Jewels across the floor of the river valley below. And where have we heard about jewels and water before?
Well, most people would say that this proves R plus L equals J because it's.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just doing I'm playing the devil's
people will
advocate
say,
on.
yeah. People will say that this is this is Rhaegar's rubies on the trident.
Right, but I'm not using it for John. I'm using it. I'm playing devil's advocate.
Right for Rhaegar as Mance. Right, this is the Mance introduction chapter, and we're getting and it's being associated with the rubies scattered on the right.
And,
so this
and
is you're right. I mean, it's actually not. It's actually not R plus L equals J symbolism. It's Rhaegar is associated with Mance symbolism, right?
Now I'm in that Mance is Sir Arthur Dayne's camp, but there is stuff in the book that does point the other way. So I mean, I feel honor bound to point it out as we come across it. I mean,
fair enough.
But
yeah, and I think that he's certainly supposed to be associated with Rhaegar and the Trident. That's just because he serves Rhaegar rather than that he is Rhaegar, in our opinion, right? And in our preferred interpretation of a deliberately ambiguous book series with multiple correct interpretations.
There you go.
Check out my latest skeet for more on that. In a way, kind of. I'm just going to joke about it anyway. There were more fires than Jon Snow could count. Hundreds of fires, thousands, a second river of flickery lights along the banks of the icy white milkwater. The fingers of his sword hand opened and closed. They descended the ridge without, and I guess we could mention that, arm symbolism is tear symbolism, and eye symbolism is Odin symbolism, and yada, yada, yada. Anyway. Oops, some people can't sit with us. Some people need to see triple Targaryens. Still counts as two. All right. They descended the ridge without banners or trumpets, the quiet broken only by the distant murmur of the. We're going to get really high that if she's going to count the ones that aren't even intentional. Anyway, without banners or trumpets, the quiet broken only by the distant murmur of the river, the clop of hooves, and the clacking of Rattleshirt's bone armor. Somewhere above, an eagle soared on great blue-gray wings, while below came men and dogs and horses and one white direwolf. A stone bounced down the slope, disturbed by a passing hoof, and Jon saw Ghost turn his head at the sudden sound. He'd followed the riders at a distance all day, as was his custom, but when the moon rose over the soldier pines, he'd come bounding up, red eyes aglow. Rattleshirt's dogs greeted him with a chorus of snarls and growls and wild barking, as ever. The direwolf paid them no mind. 6 days ago, the largest hound had attacked him from behind as the wildlings camped for the night, but Ghost had turned and lunged, sending the dog fleeing with a bloody haunch. The rest of the pack maintained a healthy distance after that. Jon Snow's Gary kind of reminds me of those stories about how you should what's the movie where he tells them that you need to punch a guy in the face right when you get to prison. Anyway, Jon Snow's Garen whickered softly, but a touch and a soft word soon quieted the animal. Would that his own fears could be calmed so easily. He was all in black, the black of the night's watch, but the enemy rode before and behind. Wildlings, and I am with them. Egret wore the cloak of Corin Halfhand. Linnell had his hauberk, the big spearwife Ragwell his gloves, one of the bowmen his boots. Corin's helm had been won by office space. Okay. I was actually thinking of what is it, American History X or something like that. Anyway, where was I? The big spearwife Ragwell his gloves, one of the bowmen his boots. Corin's helm had been won by the short, homely man called Longspear Rick, but it fit poorly on his narrow head, so he'd given that to Egret as well. And Rattleshirt and Corin's bones in his bag, along with the bloody head of Eben, who set out with Jon to scout the Skirling Pass. Dead, all dead but me, and I am dead to the world. Egret has the cloak of Jon's brother, his family colors, such as they are, almost as if they were married. Egret rode just behind him. In front was Longspear Rick. The Lord of Bones had made the two of them his guards. The crow flies, I'll pull your bones as well, he warned them when they had set out, smiling through the crooked teeth of the giant skull he wore for a helm. Egret hooted at him. You want to guard him? If you want us to do it, leave us be, and we'll do it. These are our free folk indeed, Jon saw. Rattleshirt might lead them, but none of them were shy and talking back to him. The wildling leader fixed a friendly stare. Might be you fooled these others, Crow, but don't think you'll be fooling Mance. He'll take one look at you and know you're false. And when he does, make a cloak of your wolf there, and open your soft boy's belly and sew a weasel up inside. Jon's sword hand opened and closed, flexing the burned fingers beneath the glove. But Longspear Rick only laughed. And where would you find a weasel in the snow? That first night, after a long day of horse, they made camp in a shallow stone bowl atop a nameless mountain, hunting close to the fire while the snow began to fall. Jon watched the flakes melt as they drifted over the flames. Despite his layers of wool and fur and leather, he'd felt cold to the bone. Egret sat beside him after she'd eaten, her hood pulled up and her hands tucked into her sleeves for warmth. When Mance hears how you did for Halfhand, he'll take you quick enough, she told him. Take me for what? The girl laughed scornfully. For one of us. Do you think you're the first crow ever flew down off the wall? In your hearts, you all want to fly free. And when I'm free, he said slowly, will I be free to go? Sure you will. She had a warm smile despite her crooked teeth. And we'll be free to kill you. It's dangerous being free, but most come to like the taste of it. She put her gloved hand on his leg just above the knee. You'll see. I will, thought Jon. I will see, and hear and learn, and when I have, I will carry the word back to the wall. The wildlings had taken him for an oath-breaker, but in his heart he was still a man of the Night's Watch, doing the last duty that Corin Halfhand had laid on him, before I killed him. An oath-breaker? He is his father's son. See, Triplet Targaryens, episodes 1 and 2. Mance Raider's outriders closed in as they emerged. Jon took their measure with a glance. 8 riders, men and women both, clad in fur and boiled leather, with here and there a helm or a bit of mail. They were armed with spears and fire-hardened lances, all but their leader, a fleshy blond man with watery eyes who bore a great curved scythe of sharpened steel. The Weeper, he knew at once. The Black Brothers told tales of this one. Like Rattleshirt, Harma Dogshead, and Alphen Crowkiller, he was a known raider. Hey, Charles. 3, says Lizzie.
Hey, I think it's funny that he does not mention Tormund.
Yeah, you're right. You'd think that Tormund would be famous.
Yeah.
Of course, he doesn't. Oh, he doesn't mention the other guy we're about to meet too. Sorry, I'm blanking. You know who I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
The one they even mistakes for the king. The Lord of Bones, the Weeper said when he saw him. He eyed Jon and his wolf. Who's this then? A crow come over, said Rattleshirt, who preferred to be called the Lord of Bones for the clattering armor he wore. He was afraid I'd take his bones as well as Half Hands. He shook his sack of trophies at the other wildlings. He slew Corin Half Hands, said Longspear Rick, him and that wolf of his. And did for Oral, too, said Rattleshirt. The lads of war are close enough, put in Ragwile, the big spearwife. His wolf took a piece of Half Hand's leg. The Weeper's red, roomy eyes gave Jon another look. Aye? Well, he has a wolfish cast to him, now as I look close. Bring him to Mance. Might be he'll keep him. He wheeled his horse around and galloped off, his riders hard behind him. So to the reader, wolfish cast means Stark as well as Warg, but I suspect it's more Warg here. Morning, Mother Royan. The wind was blowing wet and heavy as they crossed the valley of the Milkwater and rode single file through the river camp. Ghost kept close to Jon, but the scent of him went before them like a herald, and soon there were wildling dogs all around them, growling and barking. Lennel screamed at them to be quiet, but they paid him no heed. They don't much care for that beast of yours, Longspear Rick said to Jon. They're dogs and he's a wolf, said Jon. They know he's not their kind, no more than I am yours. But he had his duty to be mindful of, the task Corin Halfhand had laid upon him as they shared that final fire, to play the part of Turncloak and find whatever it was that the wildlings had been seeking in the bleak, cold wilderness of the Frostbangs. Some power, Corin had named it to the old bear, but he had died before learning what it was, or whether Mance Rayder had found it with his digging. There were cook fires all along the river, amongst wains and carts and sleds. Many of the wildlings had thrown up tents of hide and skin and felted wool. Others sheltered behind rocks in crude lean-tos or slept beneath their wagons. At one fire, Jon saw a man hardening the points of long wooden spears and tossing them in a pile. Elsewhere, two bearded youths in boiled leather were sparring with staffs, leaping at each other over the flames, grunting each time one landed a blow. A dozen women sat nearby in a circle, fletching arrows. Arrows for my brothers, Jon thought. Arrows for my father's folk, for the people of Winterfell and Deepwood Motte and the Last Hearth. Arrows for the North. But not all he saw was warlike. He saw women dancing as well, and heard a baby crying, and a little boy ran in front of his garron, all bundled up in fur and breathless from play. Sheep and goats wandered freely, while oxen plodded along the riverbank in search of grass. The smell of roast mutton drifted from one cook fire, and in another he saw a boar turning on a wooden spit. In an open space surrounded by tall green soldier pines, Rattleshirt dismounted. We'll make camp here, he told Lennel and Ragwile and the others. Feed the horses, then the dogs, then yourself. Egret, Longspear, bring the crow so Mance can have his look. We'll get him after. They walked the rest of the way, past more cook fires and more tents, with Ghost following at their heels. Jon had never seen so many wildlings. He wondered if anyone ever had. The camp goes on forever, he reflected, but it's more 100 camps than one, and each more vulnerable than the last. Stretched out over long leagues, the wildlings had no defenses to speak of, no pits nor sharpened stakes, only small groups of outriders patrolling the perimeters. Each group or clan or village had simply stopped where they wanted as soon as they saw others stopping or found a likely spot. The free folk. If his brothers were to catch them in such disarray, many of them would pay for that freedom with their life's blood. They had numbers, but the Night's Watch had discipline, and in battle, discipline beats numbers 9 times of every 10, his father had once told him. And that is kind of the case when Stannis shows up, right? He's badly outnumbered, but it still works.
Well, I mean, even the plan that the Mormont and all of them are making about the
it's not quite as dumb as it seems.
No.
There was no doubting which tent was the king's. It was thrice the size of the next largest he'd seen, and he could hear music drifting from within. Like many of the lesser tents, it was made of sewn hides with the fur still on, but Mance Rayder's hides were the shaggy white pelts of snow bears. The peaked roof was crowned with a huge set of antlers from one of the giant elks that had once roamed freely throughout the Seven Kingdoms in the times of the First Men. Mance lives in a white tower, like the Kingsguard. See Triplet Targaryens, episode 6. Here, at least, they found defenders. 2 guards at the flap of the tent, leaning on tall spears with round leather shields strapped to their arms. When they caught sight of Ghost, one of them lowered his spear point and said, "That beast stays here." "Ghost, stay," Jon commanded. The direwolf sat. "Longspear, watch the beast." Rattleshirt yanked open the tent and gestured Jon and Egret inside. The tent was hot and smoky. Baskets of burning peat stood in all four corners, filling the air with a dim reddish light. More skins carpeted the ground. Jon felt utterly alone as he stood there in his blacks, awaiting the pleasure of the turncloak who called himself king beyond the wall. When his eyes had adjusted to the smoky red gloom, he saw 6 people, none of whom paid him any mind. A dark young man and a pretty blonde woman were sharing a horn of mead. A pregnant woman stood over a brazier cooking a brace of hens, while a gray-haired man in a tattered cloak of black and red sat cross-legged on a pillow playing a lute and singing.
Before you go on, the
All right, go ahead.
the when his eyes had adjusted, the smoky red gloom, the tent is in red is predominant inside the tent. It's another one of those.
Sure. Right, and there's a tattered cloak, so that it specifically says tattered, right? So that ties Mance to the tattered prince, who tells us specifically, "Those tatters fill my foes with fear, and on the battlefield, the sight of my rags blowing in the wind emboldens my men more than any banner. And if I want to move unseen, I need only slip it off to become plain and unremarkable." And the red and black indicate his service to the pretty blonde woman. See Triplet Targaryens, episodes 6 and 7.
Is she going to be able to keep up?
The Dornishman's wife was as fair as the sun, and her kisses were warmer than spring. But the Dornishman's blade was made of black steel, and its kiss was a terrible thing. Jon knew the song, that was strange to hear it here in a shaggy hide tent beyond the wall, 10,000 leagues from the Red Mountains and warm winds of Dorne. Yes, very strange. George loves to point these things out. See Triplet Targaryens, episode 6.
The black steel also makes you think of Valyrian steel.
Yep. Right. It would be a little too obvious for it to be white, but I would agree. It definitely sounds like it's supposed to be Valyrian steel. Part. Rattleshirt took off his yellowed helm. Oh, he broke. Rattleshirt took off his yellowed helm as he waited for the song to end. One of the things that one of the reasons why I want to highlight the fact that he says very strange. He specifically calls things out when they're like that. Like, right. This is one of the things I like about the Joanna's alive theory. Right. Is Tyrion specifically notes this story doesn't make any sense. Right. And when an odd time to come visiting. Right. That why would you still come to visit under those circumstances? Well, the reason they would come to visit and have a cabin prepared for a highborn guest is that they're going to bring back a highborn guest, right? Anyway, so anytime he's telling you something that literally makes no sense, he highlights the fact that it literally makes no sense.
Yeah.
I know Free Folk are proud to say they are not like Southerners and that they have their own ways, but you can see that they are still actually very similar with the similarities in the chapter. Yep. Rattleshirt took off his yellowed helm as he waited for the song to end. Beneath his bone and leather armor, he was a small man, and the face under the giant skull was ordinary, with a knobby chin, thin mustache, and sallow, pinched cheeks. His eyes were close set, one eyebrow creeping all the way across his forehead, dark hair thinning back from a sharp widow's peak. The Dornishman's wife would sing as she bathed, in a voice that was sweet as a peach. But the Dornishman's blade had a song of its own, and a bite sharp and cold as a leech. Beside the brazier, a short but immensely broad man sat on a stool, eating a hen off a skewer. Hot grease was running down his chin and into his snow-white beard, but he smiled happily all the same. Thick gold bands graven with runes bound his massive arms, and he wore a heavy shirt of black ringmail that could only have come from a dead ranger. Could it, though? Anyway, a few feet away, a taller, leaner man in a leather shirt. So, we know that he hangs out with, or at least most of us believe that he hangs out with House Mormont. So it's not really all that clear that he needs to loot his stuff. I mean, the guy wears gold. Anyway. A few feet away, a taller, leaner man in a leather shirt sewn with bronze scales stood frowning over a map, a two-handed greatsword slung across his back in a leather sheath. He was straight as a spear, all long, wiry muscle, clean-shaved, bald, with a strong, straight nose and deep-set gray eyes. He might even have been comely if he'd had ears, but he'd lost both along the way. Whether to frostbite or some enemy's knife, Jon could not tell. Their lack made the man's head seem narrow and pointed. Both the white-bearded man and the bald one were warriors. That was plain to John at a glance. These two were more dangerous than Rattleshirt by far. He wondered which was Mance Rayder. As he lay on the ground with the darkness around and the taste of his blood on his tongue, his brothers knelt by him and prayed him a prayer, and he smiled and he laughed and he sung. Brothers, oh brothers, my days here are done. The Dornishman's taken my life. But what does it matter? For all men must die, and I've tasted the Dornishman's wife. I love how George follows the Mance Rayder speculation immediately with the singing, somewhat
Yeah.
associating the singing with Mance. Anyway, not that it's a big surprise anyway, but
Well,
it's
also
not
in
a
the
reread.
song, he's talking to his brothers. The brothers all kneel around, whatever. So I mean, brothers of the Night's Watch,
or the King's Guard.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yep. As the last strains of the Dornishman's wife faded, the bald, earless man glanced up from his map and scowled ferociously at Rattleshirt and Egret, with John between them. What's this? He said. A crow? The black bastard, what gutted Oral, said Rattleshirt, and a bloody warg as well. You were to kill them all. This one come over, explained Egret. He slew Corin Halfhand with his own hand. This boy? The earless man was angered by the news. The Halfhand should have been mine. Do you have a name, Crow? Jon Snow, your grace. He wondered whether he was expected to bend the knee as well. Your grace? The earless man looked at the big white-bearded one. You see, he takes me for a king. The bearded man laughed so hard he sprayed bits of chicken everywhere. He rubbed the grease from his mouth with the back of a huge hand. A blind boy must be. Who ever heard of a king without ears? Why, his crown would fall straight down to his neck. Har! He grinned at John, wiping his fingers clean on his breeches. Close your beak, Crow. Spin yourself around. Might be you'd find who you're looking for. John turned. The singer rose to his feet. I'm Mance Rayder, he said as he put aside the lute. And you are Ned Stark's bastard, the Snow of Winterfell. Stunned, John stood speechless for a moment before he recovered enough to say, How could you know? That's a tale for later, said Mance Rayder. How did you like the song, lad? Well enough. I'd heard it before. But what does it matter? For all men must die, the king beyond the wall said lightly. And I've tasted the Dornishman's wife. Tell me, does my lord of Bone speak truly? Did you slay my old friend the Halfhand? I did. It was his doing more than mine. The Shadow Tower will never again seem as fearsome, the king said with sadness in his voice. Corin was my enemy, but also my brother once. So, shall I thank you for killing him, Jon Snow, or curse you? Gave John a mocking smile. Only once? I'm skeptical. Anyway. The king beyond the wall looked nothing like a king. I suppose I should say Trigger episode 6. Anyway, that wasn't done in the notes, but that's fine. The king beyond the wall looked nothing like a king, nor even much a wildling. I think this is kind of important, actually. This paragraph. He was of middling height, slender, sharp-faced, with shrewd brown eyes and long brown hair that had gone mostly to gray. There was no crown on his head, no gold rings on his arms, no jewels at his throat, not even a gleam of silver. He wore wool and leather, and his only garment of note was his ragged black wool cloak, its long tears patched with faded red silk. It sounds like if he wanted to move unseen, he could slip off his tattered cloak and become plain and unremarkable. Also notice he has shrewd brown eyes. For more on shrewd eyes, see Triple Trigger episode 6.
Okay. This paragraph also, I believe, gives credence to my theory that Mance Rayder is a glamour. All right. He is middling height and slender, and Rattleshirt isn't a big man either. But when he puts on the sparring armor at Castle Black, John noticeably sees the bigger difference and just chalks it up to being the armor.
Right.
And if
I definitely agree that the glamour has been overridden by the armor at that point. The Rattleshirt glamour has been overridden by the armor at that point.
Well, not only that, if Mance Rayder's persona, his look, is not a glamour, then there would have been no reason for Melisandre to say one word and then each person Mance, and Jon to hear different words. I mean,
I think
that's
it
just the way
goes
my
through a
brain's
lot of
thinking.
effort. I think it goes through so much effort to imply that he could get away with this. That anyway.
We'll never convince each other.
No.
Yep.
You ought to thank me for killing your enemy, Jon said finally, and curse me for killing your friend. It kind of reminds me of Davos and Stannis, right?
Yeah.
Har! Boomed the white-bearded man. Well answered. Agreed, Mance Rayder beckoned Jon closer. If you would join us, you'd best know us. The man you took me for is Stur, Magnar of Then. Magnar means lord in the old tongue. The earless man stared at Jon coldly as Mance turned to the white-bearded one. Our ferocious chicken eater here is my loyal Tormund. The woman. Tormund rose to his feet. Hold! You gave Stur his style. Give me mine. Mance Rayder laughed. As you wish. Jon Snow, before you stands Tormund Giantsbane, tall talker, hornblower, and breaker of ice. And here also, Tormund Thunderfist, husband of bears, the mead king of Ruddy Hall, speaker to gods and father of hosts. That sounds more like me, said Tormund. Well met, Jon Snow. I am fond of wargs, as it happens, though not of Starks. The good woman at the brazier, Mance Rayder went on, is Dalla. The pregnant woman smiled shyly. Treat her like you would any queen. She is carrying my child. He turned to the last two. This beauty is her sister, Val. Young Jarl beside her is her latest pet. I am no man's pet, said Jarl, dark and fierce. And Val's no man, white-bearded Tormund snorted. You ought to have noticed that by now, lad. So there you have us, Jon Snow, said Mance Rayder. The king beyond the wall in his court, such as it is. And now some words from you, I think. Where did you come from? Winterfell, he said, by way of Castle Black. And what brings you up the Milkwater, so far from the fires of home? He did not wait for Jon's answer, but looked at once to Rattleshirt. How many were they? 5. 3's dead, and the boy's here. The other went up a mountainside where no horse could follow. Rayder's eyes met Jon's again. Was it only the 5 of you? Or are more of your brothers skulking about? We were 4 in the half-hand. Corin was worth 20 common men. The king beyond the wall smiled at that. Some thought so. Still, a boy from Castle Black with rangers from the Shadow Tower? How did that come to be? Jon had his lie all ready. The Lord Commander sent me the half-hand for seasoning, so he took me on his ranging. Stur the Magnar frowned at that. Ranging, you call it? Why would crows come ranging up the Skirling Pass? The villages were deserted, Jon said truthfully. It was as if all the free folk had vanished. Vanished, aye, said Mance Rayder, and not just the free folk. Who told you where we were, Jon Snow? Tormund snorted. It were Craster, or I'm a blushing maid. I told you, Mance. That creature needs to be shorter by a head. King gave the older man an irritated look. Tormund, someday try thinking before you speak. I know it was Craster. I asked Jon to see if he would tell it true. Bilbo was hornblower when talking to Smog, relating to Bard blowing the horn. Har, Tormund spat. Well, I stepped in that. He grinned at Jon. See, lad, that's why he's king and I'm not. I can outdrink, outfight, and outsing him, and my member's thrice the size of his, but Mance has cunning. He was raised a crow, you know, and the crow's a tricksy bird. I would speak with the lad alone, my lord of bones, Mance Rayder said to Rattleshirt. Leave us, all of you. What, me as well, said Tormund. No, you especially, said Mance. I eat in no hall where I'm not welcome. Tormund got to his feet. Me and the hens are leaving. He snatched another chicken off the brazier, shoved it into a pocket sewn in the lining of his cloak, said "Har!" and left licking his fingers. The others followed him out, all but the woman Dalla. And Order of the Green Hand likes to cite this one as a special example of Tormund sort of forgetting that he's a wildling and kind of throwing in the har after he's done all these things as he leaves. Anyway. Or maybe I should say forgetting he's supposed to be pretending to be a wildling.
Yeah.
Sit if you like, Rayder said when they were gone. Are you hungry? Tormund left us 2 birds at least. I would be pleased to eat, your grace, and thank you. Your grace? The king smiled. That's not a style one often hears from the lips of free folk. I'm manced most, the mance to some. Will you take a horn of mead? Gladly, said Jon. The king poured himself as Dalla cut the well-crisped hens apart and brought them each a half. Jon peeled off his gloves and ate with his fingers, sucking every morsel of meat off the bones. Tormund spoke truly, said Mance Rayder as he ripped apart a loaf of bread. The black crow is a tricksy bird, that's so. But I was a crow when you were no bigger than the babe in Dalla's belly, Jon Snow. So take care not to play tricksy with me. As you say, you're Mance. King laughed. You're Mance. Why not? I promised you a tale before of how I knew you. Have you puzzled it out yet? John shook his head. Did Rattleshirt send word ahead? By wing? We have no trained ravens. No, I knew your face. I've seen it before, twice. It made no sense at first, but as John turned it over in his mind, dawn broke. When you were brother of the watch. Bilbo was invisible and giving a false identity to Smog while he used the hornblower like a hidden identity. Ah, better than horse blood oats. Oh yeah, absolutely. Anyway, the dawn broke in a story about broken swords and the last hero while talking with Mance Rayder. We see what you did there, George. See Triplet Trigger in episode 6. Very good. Yes, that was the. Oh, yeah. Very good. Yes, that was the first time. You were just a boy, and I was all in black, one of a dozen riding escort to old Lord Commander Corgyle when he came down to see your father at Winterfell. I was walking the wall around the yard when I came on you and your brother Rob. It had snowed the night before, and the two of you had built a great mountain above the gate and were waiting for someone likely to pass underneath. I remember, said John with a startled laugh. A young black brother on the wall walk, yes. You swore not to tell, and kept my vow, that one at least. We dumped the snow on Fat Tom. He was father's slowest guardsman. Tom had chased him around the yard afterward until all three were red as autumn apples. But you said you saw me twice. When was the other time? When King Robert came to Winterfell to make your father hand, the king beyond the wall said lightly. John's eyes widened in disbelief. That can't be so. It was. When your father learned the king was coming, he sent word to his brother Benjen on the wall, so he might come down for the feast. There's more commerce between the Black Brothers and the Free Folk than you know, and soon enough word came to my ears as well. It was too choice a chance to resist. Your uncle did not know me by sight, so I had no fear from that quarter, and I did not think your father was like to remember a young crow he'd met briefly years before. I wanted to see this Robert with my own eyes, king to king, and get the measure of your Uncle Benjen as well. He was first ranger by then and the bane of all my people. So I saddled my fleetest horse and rode. But John objected, the wall. The wall can stop an army, but not a man alone. I took a lute and a bag of silver, scaled the ice near Longbarrow, walked a few leagues south of the new gift, and bought a horse. All in all, I made much better time than Robert, who was traveling with a ponderous great wheelhouse to keep his queen in comfort. A day south of Winterfell, I came up on him and fell in with his company. Free riders and hedge knights are always attaching themselves to royal processions in hopes of finding service with the king, and my lute gave me easy acceptance. He laughed. I know every bawdy song that's ever been made, north or south of the wall. So there you are. The night your father feasted Robert, I sat in the back of his hall on a bench with the other free riders, listening to Orland of Oldtown play the high harp and sing of dead kings beneath the sea. I betook of your lord father's meat and mead, had a look at Kingslayer and Imp, and made passing note of Lord Eddard's children and the wolf pups that ran at their heels. So George said he would reveal who hired the catspaw and Storm. Just so, with Mance telling us he was there and he brought the bag of silver. And Tyrion even tells us he figures out it had to have been somebody else, a third player that none of us are thinking of. There's somebody else there, and then he gets interrupted right as he thinks that. Anyway, somehow Mance knows how royal processions work. In a world without photos, very few people are truly famous and recognizable. The Hound might be the only truly universally recognizable person on the planet. The former Kingsguard goes to see a king named after Robert at a feast, confidently approaching a knight he's dealt with more times than he can count without a disguise, and Arya is shocked he's not recognized. Cat boldly studies Jason Mallister and sees no recognition in his eyes. Yet people think Arthur couldn't be as bold as Cat or the most recognizable former Kingsguard. Anyway.
Like I said, we won't convince each other.
All right. Well, I think let's put it this way. I think this is one of the interpretations that's supposed to be correct. You give me that?
Yes. Well, I think of it as false breadcrumbs.
Okay. Bael the Bard, said John, remember the tale that Ygritte had told him in the Frostangs that he'd almost killed her? Would that I were. I will not deny that Bael's exploit inspired mine own, but I did not steal either of your sisters that I recall. Bael wrote his own songs and lived them. I only sing the songs that better men have made. More mead. But Abel will try to steal Arya. No, said John. If you had been discovered, taken, Your father would have had my head off, the king gave a shrug. Though once I'd eaten at his board, I was protected by guest right. The laws of hospitality are as old as the first men and sacred as a heart tree. He gestured at the board between them, the broken bread and chicken bones. Here you are the guest, and safe from harm at my hands. This night, at least. So tell me truly, Jon Snow, are you a craven who turned your cloak from fear? Or is there another reason that brings you to my tent? Guest right or no, Jon Snow knew he walked on rotten ice here. One false step and he might plunge through into water cold enough to stop his heart. Weigh every word before you speak it, he told himself. He took a long draught of mead to buy time for his answer. When he set the horn aside, he said, Tell me why you turned your cloak, and I'll tell you why I turned mine. Mance Rayder smiled as Jon had hoped he would. The king was plainly a man to like the sound of his own voice. You will have heard stories of my desertion, I have no doubt. Some say it was for a crown. Some say for a woman. Others that you had the wildling blood. Some might say it was for Val's crown, or for Val's blood. See Triplet Targaryen's episode 7. The wildling blood is the blood of the first men, the same blood that flows in the veins of the Starks. As to a crown, do you see one? I see a woman, he glanced at Dalla. Mance took her by the hand and pulled her close. My lady is blameless. I met her on my return from your father's castle. The half-hand was carved of old oak, but I am made of flesh, and I have a great fondness for the charms of women, which makes me no different from 3/4 of the watch. There are men still wearing black who have had carved from wood. Sounds like a spear, doesn't it? Sorry, I just noticed that. Which makes me no different than from 3/4 of the watch. There are men still wearing black who have had 10 times as many women as this poor king. You must guess again, Jon Snow. Jon considered a moment. The half-hand said you had a passion for wildling music. I do. That's closer to the mark, yes, but not a hit. Mance Rayder rose, unfastened the clasp that held his cloak, and swept it over the bench. It was for this. A cloak? I would say it was for his white cloak. See Triplet Targaryen episode 6. The black wool cloak of a sworn brother of the Night's Watch, said the king beyond the wall. One day on arranging, we brought down a fine big elk. We were skinning it when the smell of blood drew a shadow cat out of its lair. I drove it off, but not before it shredded my cloak to ribbons. Do you see? Here, and here, he chuckled. It shredded my arm and back as well, and I bled worse than the elk. My brothers feared I might die before they got me back to Maester Mullen at the Shadow Tower, so they carried me to a wildling village where we knew an old wise woman did some healing. She was dead as it happened, but her daughter saw to me, cleaned my wounds, sewed me up, and fed me porridge and potions until I was strong enough to ride again. And she sewed up the rents in my cloak as well with some scarlet silk from a shy that her grandmother had pulled from the wreck of a cog washed up on the frozen shore. It was the greatest treasure she had, and her gift to me. He swept the cloak back over his shoulders. But at the Shadow Tower, I was given a new wool cloak from the stores, black and trimmed with black, to go with my black breeches and black boots, my black doublet and black mail. The new cloak had no frays, nor rips, nor tears, and most of all, no red. The men of the Night's Watch dressed in black, Sir Dennis Mallister reminded me sternly, as if I'd forgotten. My old cloak was fit for burning now, he said. I was listening from the shower. That's 10. At 11. We've broken down the wall. Sorry, Chris. 11. All right. I left the next morning for a place where a kiss was not a crime and a man could wear any cloak he chose. Closed the clasp and sat back down again. And you, Jon Snow? Was it really her daughter? Was she really dead? She's symbolically tied to Melisandre, but could she be Melisandre? I think it's not an unreasonable interpretation. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And also, why would a ship that had silt from a shy be anywhere near the frozen shore?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it sure seems like it's and he came back. He met Dalla on his way back, and the Order of Green Hand would argue, well, maybe Dalla is the Dalla that we've heard of before, right? Maybe he actually goes back through Stannis and Melisandre.
Also, if you go through his reasoning of all the steps that he had to take to get to the king's provision, just walking from the wall past the new gift, south of the new gift,
to a day further than Winterfell, in fact.
Well, yeah, a day passed, but I mean, just to get just south of the new gift, that's like what, 300 miles? It's 150 leagues, which would be what, 300 miles, roughly.
Okay.
So he walked 300 miles plus the trip to the wall, climbing down the wall, which I say he went through the Black Gate if he was north of the wall. Just,
That makes sense.
well, I mean, just the words. I mean, I don't think the wall
Right.
can
Well, he's
discern
wearing
from a deserter or a
right.
brother.
And he's wearing the cloak of the Night's Watch, and yeah,
Right.
that
He
makes sense to
knows
me.
the words. That's all that matters for the gate. But that
Right.
still going south of the wall, through the wall, 150 leagues, 300 miles, and then on horse to go a day past Winterfell.
Yeah,
And
I do wonder if we're going to learn more
Benjen
about this.
barely made it there in time.
I do wonder if it's going to be revealed that yes, he was working with Stannis the whole time.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
interesting concept.
yeah, I agree that he was definitely south of the wall when he found out, whether it was with Stannis or whether it was the Manderleys.
The whole point of killing Bran is that the person who does it is a good guy. So the theory of Joffrey is that he did it because he's a nice guy who's trying to put a dying boy out of his misery. That's literally the accepted theory is that Robert thought it would be a mercy to kill Bran, a kindness, and so whoever did it to be good. That's the prevailing theory of most people, right? So why wouldn't Mance be good? Like not only that, but if as Dude has proposed, the actual point was for him to be caught, or at least to leave the dagger to frame someone, right? Then whether or not he's successful in delivering the mercy and kindness, the real point is to sow discord and preferably keep Ned up north without the support of the crown.
That
Anyway, Jon took another swallow of mead. There's only one tale that you might believe. You say you're at Winterfell the night my father feasted King Robert. I did say it, for I was. Then you saw us all, Prince Joffrey and Prince Tommen, Princess Myrcella, my brothers Robb and Bran and Rickon, my sisters Arya and Sansa. You saw them walk the center aisle with every eye upon them and take their seats at the table just below the dais where the king and queen were seated. I remember. Did you see where I was seated, Mance? He leaned forward. Did you see where they put the bastard? Mance Rayder looked at Jon's face for a long moment. I think we'd best find you a new cloak, the king said, holding out his hand. Up next, Storm 8, Daenerys 1. Arston tells us of Rhaegar's oldest friend, some guy named Arthur Dayne. Jorah explains the 3 heads, and Dany responds, but my brothers are dead. This all happens right after we meet Val and Mance. See, Triplet Targaryens, episodes 6 and 7.
all right. Just playing devil's advocate and shoe on
sure.
the other foot.
Sure.
In the next chapter, we are told about Rhaegar's best friend. They're both mentioned.
True. Because doesn't my friends. That's a good point. That's true. Yeah, but right. We said we'd point out the fact that there's that there's clues that he could be Rhaegar, right? And we're specifically hinted a few times that Rhaegar could be alive. There's, at least Rhaegar Targaryen is still dead. Is one of the things you hear and so forth. So it's definitely he definitely drops these bits of irony if Rhaegar was still alive and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. I mean, I think that's not a terribly unreasonable interpretation. I personally like the idea that all 3 of the shrewd-eyed characters are Kingsguards. The one thing that's different about Lewin versus the Martell look is that he's tall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're specifically told in Oakhart's chapter, we're specifically told that Prince Lewin, I didn't include this, and I should have, is that he was as tall as a tower. That's literally the words that Ariane uses to describe him. So if anybody was looking at my claim that he looks like all the Martell characters, except that he's tall, we're specifically told that Prince Lewin is tall as a tower. So anyway, just something I thought it was worth noting. That's one thing I forgot to include in that episode that probably should have. It's good to know that Rhaegar Arthur Dayne thinks, no, that's the point. Joffrey wouldn't actually act like a good guy and put somebody out of their misery. That's kind of our complaint. In addition, I don't think he would. How would he ever possibly find that cat's paw? Like, that's not the type of guy that Joffrey would hang out with. Um, Joffrey has specifically told us that he has no interest in killing Bran, whereas Sandor specifically said that he would like to kill Bran. And so he could have just told Sandor. He basically never carries money, never orders. He just orders people to do things. We even see that when he's with Sansa, right? He doesn't believe in paying for things. He believes in ordering people to do things. Like the idea that he would somehow find himself a bag of silver. How? Like he's going to suddenly start asking for money when he never pays anybody to do anything, just orders people to do things. He's going to suddenly go around and say, "Hey, I need a bag of silver." Like, really?
Well,
is he going to do that? Anyway,
if it's Littlefinger's influence from a great distance, meaning that Littlefinger is a skin changer or green seer, because George said that yes, Littlefinger had an influence on Joffrey,
sure.
but
Sure.
you had to get over
Right.
the distance, and that's the way you get over the distance. Is Littlefinger is special. All right, Littlefinger could have laid all of this out and manipulating Joffrey into trying to get that pat on the head from Robert that pays him no attention whatsoever.
Right. Right. And he doesn't tell him that he did it. He doesn't tell Cersei that he did it. He just does what his parents want without letting them know. And like the whole thing is just a big. It's a big. I mean, Jaime's logic is basically Mance Rayder wasn't there, so it must have been Joffrey. And it's like, what? It's like, first off, the alternative that you'll see that kind of that people like Toodles and Illyria parties will say is that there's all these textual hints that it was a king's man, right? Which I would argue it means Mance's man. But go back and listen to how he explained it before. Okay, I may have misspoken, but the point is the theory. What I was trying to say was the theory is that most people accept is that Joffrey, in his infinite mercy, was acting benevolently to put a dying child out of their misery, or potentially to impress his father by not telling him, which, whatever. Like I said, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And it's based upon Tyrion remembering the opposite of what happened, right? What actually happened was he remembers that Joffrey wanted Bran dead. That's the opposite of what happened. Joffrey specifically tells us, "I don't want Bran dead." He says, "I want Summer dead." And before he clarifies, the Hound volunteers, "I'll do it for you. I would like to kill Bran because he needs to be put out of his misery, and I'm a good guy," right? And so the whole theory is that Joffrey was being the good, benevolent guy that he is and putting a child out of their misery because Robert and Cersei thought it would be good for Bran to be given the gift of mercy. That's the prevailing theory. I mean, that's what people claim. I think it's ridiculous, but that's what people claim. And George has confirmed that that's a correct interpretation. He was working with the app developers just as he was working with the show developers, and they assumed that was what happened because Jaime says that. Which the main alternative theory that you'll see, there's all these textual clues that say king's man. There's the clue of Robert. Only a fool would send someone with his own dagger, that Robert tends to get drunk and forget what he does, that Robert clearly wanted to deliver the gift of mercy to Bran. And so therefore, well, maybe Robert hired this guy. And that's something that you'll hear as the alternative theory from Illyria parties or Toodles. And it's a reasonable interpretation as well, right? There's textual clues towards that. There's personally, I love the idea that Tyrion is interrupted as he's thinking about how there must be some other player that we're not even aware of, and isn't that scary? And then he gets interrupted, right? And to me, that's and this, of course, this is when we haven't yet learned that Mance Rayder was there with a bag of silver that he brought, right? So anyway, so my interpretation is yes, Mance is being a good guy. And no, Joffrey's not being a good guy, and that the alternative explanation that Joffrey is this nice guy doesn't make much sense.
Well, I guarantee you, Joffrey's not a nice guy. I'm not saying that's why he did it.
But that's the prevailing theory, that he overheard that Robert and Cersei talking about how it would be a gift of mercy and how they should
He's
kill
not
him and put
doing
him on
it
his
to be
newspaper.
merciful at all.
Right. People think he's doing it to impress his father, but then not telling anybody that he does it. Right.
Well, I mean, the news that Bran was attempted murder has never reached for Joffrey to say, "Hey, I did that."
I suppose. So you think that he would have?
It all depends on how Robert reacted.
I suppose. Yeah, that's an interesting idea that he could have wanted and waited for reaction before deciding. Okay.
You getting a phone call?
No, I think my Bluetooth cut.
See, even your computer doesn't like what you're saying.
Oh, my phone doesn't like it
Your
anymore.
phone doesn't like what you're saying.
My phone is freaking out on me now.
Oh,
All right, we better wrap this up because my phone doesn't seem to think that we need to continue.
okay. All right. Well, we got Daenerys
I don't
on
know. My screen
Wednesday.
went blank there for a second. Now it's back.
Got it?
Arthur Denning's killing Bran will make him a nice guy. Yeah, I mean, it's actually it's sort of wild and custom that you would do that.
It's definitely something that would be done
Take out my
north of the
headset so it
wall.
doesn't keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
Arthur Denning's
So, oh, you're all messed up now. You're not moving, and we can't hear you. See, all that nonsense you spoke, it just messed it all up. Okay, I can hear you now.
All right. I don't know what's going on. My phone's acting funny.
I told you, it didn't like what you were saying. What's Lizzie say?
Well, we better wrap this up because
Okay.
it's acting funny.
Okay, no problem. All right, we'll see everybody Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel for Daenerys. Is it Daenerys 1?
Yes.
Okay. All right, y'all be good. Have a talk with your computer. Explain your views on A Song of Ice and Fire so this does not happen again. So it'll get on page with you, even though you could be wrong. Or me. But all right, y'all be good.
Week.
Take care. Bye.
Week, Lizzie. Bye.
Bye, y'all.